Before first light, when mist clung to the ridgelines and the world held its breath between darkness and light, a lone figure crouched on a windswept ridge overlooking the vast river valley. His weathered hands pressed against the damp grass, testing the moisture that could ruin everything. Too wet, and the smoke would hang low and heavy, choking out his message before it could climb skyward. Too dry, and the flames might spread beyond the carefully built signal fire, consuming the sacred cedar and destroying the precision required for what was about to unfold. If you've ever wondered how news traveled faster than lightning before the modern world arrived, you're about to discover the most sophisticated communication network ancient America ever created. The grass yielded just the right amount of moisture between his fingers. Perfect. He moved to the prepared fire pit, where bundles of green cedar boughs waited alongside dried pine needles and strips of inner bark from the paper birch. This was no ordinary fire, no casual gathering of flames for warmth or cooking. Every element had been selected for its specific burning properties, its particular smoke signature, its ability to create the clean, white column that would rise straight and true in the still morning air. His name was Tahawus, meaning sky clearer in the tongue of his people, and for 12 seasons he had served as the northern relay keeper for the great messaging network that stretched from the great water in the east to the endless grasslands beyond the western mountains. His hands moved with practiced certainty as he arranged the tinder, remembering the words of his predecessor. The message fire speaks with its own voice. Your task is to give it the proper words to say. The eastern horizon showed the first pale hint of dawn as Tahawus struck flint against iron pyrite, sending sparks into the prepared nest of tinder. The flames caught immediately, fed by the precise arrangement of materials. He added the green cedar slowly, watching as white smoke began to rise in a thin, controlled column. Then came the crucial moment, the blanket work that would transform simple smoke into coded speech. Using a dampened buffalo hide stretched between 2 wooden poles, he began the ancient dance of message-making. 3 quick puffs released skyward, followed by a long sustained column, then 2 more quick bursts. The pattern repeated twice more before he paused, waiting. The message was clear to any who knew the old speech. Bearer comes with urgent word from the eastern councils. Prepare the river crossing and ready the next runner. From across the valley, nearly 2 ridges distant, came the answering thread of smoke. A thin column rising from what appeared to be empty forest, visible only because he knew exactly where to look. The response confirmed receipt and understanding. The network was awake, alert, ready to carry forward whatever message now approached through the morning mist. Tahawus allowed his fire to die to embers. Then began the careful process of erasure that would leave no trace of his presence for unfriendly eyes. Every stick was scattered, every ash brushed away, every stone returned to its natural position. The messaging posts operated in absolute secrecy, their locations known only to those who carried the sacred trust of the word-bearers. He settled into the concealed watching place carved into the rock face, where he could observe the approach trail while remaining invisible to anyone passing below. The wait would not be long. The smoke speech had confirmed that the runner was already moving, following the ancient pathways that connected village to village, council fire to council fire, across distances that would take a normal traveler many days to cross. The sound reached him first, the steady rhythm of moccasined feet against the forest floor, approaching from the southeast along the hidden trail that wound between the massive oak trees. Then came the runner himself, emerging from the green shadows like a piece of the forest given human form. He was young, perhaps 20 summers, with the lean build and ground-eating stride of one trained from childhood in the messenger's art. His breathing remained steady despite having covered what Tahawus knew was at least the distance of 3 valleys since the previous relay point. The runner carried the sacred bundle against his chest, wrapped in doeskin and secured with sinew cording, and more importantly, he bore the 2 items that would authenticate his message and ensure its safe passage to the next keeper. In his left hand, clearly visible as he approached, was the bark strip token, a piece of white birch bark no larger than a man's palm, carved with the intricate spiral pattern that marked him as bearing words from the Grand Council of the Eastern Shore. In his right hand, wound carefully around his fingers, was the speaking cord, a length of braided basswood fiber in which had been tied a complex series of knots, each one representing a different element of the message he carried in his memory. Tahawus rose from his concealment and stepped into view, raising his right hand in the formal greeting reserved for message-bearers. "I see you, runner of the sacred words. The sky path is clear, and the next keeper has been warned of your approach." The runner slowed but did not stop, maintaining the momentum that was crucial to his mission. "I greet you, sky clearer. The words I carry are heavy with importance, and they must not rest long in any one place." He extended the bark token, which Tahawus examined carefully in the growing morning light. The spiral carving was deep and precise, cut with a particular tooth-edge pattern that could not be forged. Around the edge ran a series of small notches, each one corresponding to a specific council member's mark. Tahawus counted 11 notches, nearly the full council, meaning whatever message the runner carried had been approved by almost every voice of authority in the Eastern Territories. More telling still was the speaking cord. As the runner unwound it from his fingers, Tahawus could see the complex pattern of knots woven into its length. Large knots alternating with small ones, some tied singly, others in groups of 2 or 3. Each knot position, each grouping, each variation in the cord's natural color represented a specific word or concept in the ancient memory speech of the message carriers. "The Western councils must know," the runner said, his voice carrying the formal cadence used for message transmission, "that the Southern traders bring word of great changes beyond the salt water. New peoples have been seen along the far shores, of great changes beyond the far salt water, things no one here had proper names for. The Grand Council declares that all allied nations should prepare for strange times ahead, and that the annual gathering at the Great Falls should be moved to an earlier season." Tahawus felt the weight of these words settling into his memory, where they would remain unchanged until he could pass them to the next keeper in the chain. This was indeed a message of profound importance, the kind that would reshape the decisions of councils across half the continent. The Southern traders who traveled the Great Water in their massive dugout vessels were known for the reliability of their information. If they spoke of changes beyond the salt water, the implications reached far beyond simple curiosity about distant lands. "The next keeper waits at the bend of the rapid river," Tahawus told the runner, "where the standing stones mark the old boundary. The crossing is shallow there, and he will have fresh moccasins and dried meat waiting. Beyond that point, the message goes to Stormwatcher, who tends the high relay on Hawk's Eye Mountain." The runner nodded, rewinding the speaking cord around his fingers with practiced care. The bark token disappeared back into his pouch, where it would remain until he reached the next authentication point. Without another word, he resumed his ground-eating lope, following the trail as it descended toward the valley floor and the distant river crossing. Tahawus watched until the forest swallowed the runner's form, then began preparing for his own part in the relay. Within moments of the runner's departure, he had rekindled his signal fire and was sending the coded smoke message that would alert Stormwatcher of the approaching bearer. 3 long columns, followed by 7 quick puffs, then a sustained release that would be visible from the distant mountain peak. The mountain keeper's response came almost immediately. A brief flash of reflected sunlight from a polished copper mirror, the prearranged signal confirming readiness to receive the message. The runner's path led him down through dense stands of maple and birch, following game trails that had been traveled by countless generations of both animals and humans. These were not the broad trading routes used by large groups, but the narrow, secret ways known only to the message carriers and the hunters who supplied the relay stations with meat and hides. Every few hundred paces, carved marks on certain trees indicated the proper path, subtle signs that would be invisible to untrained eyes, but clear as written words to those who knew the forest script. As the sun climbed toward its highest point, the runner reached the banks of the rapid river, where the current ran swift and clear over a bed of smooth stones. The crossing point was marked by 3 standing stones, each as tall as a man and covered with the faded paint marks of previous generations. These stones served multiple purposes: boundary markers, navigation aids, and sacred sites where travelers could rest and make offerings for safe passage. The water ran knee-deep at the ford, cold from its mountain sources but not dangerously swift. The runner paused only long enough to secure his message bundle high on his chest, ensuring that neither the bark token nor the speaking cord would be damaged by the crossing. The authentication materials were irreplaceable. If lost or damaged, the entire network would regard any message as false, no matter how urgent the information might be. Halfway across the river, he encountered the next authentication challenge. From the far bank, a figure emerged from the concealing shadows of a massive willow tree. This was the river keeper, an elderly woman whose responsibility was to verify the legitimacy of any message-bearer attempting to cross into the Western Territories. Her presence here was no coincidence. The smoke signal from Tahawas had arrived well ahead of the runner, giving her time to reach the crossing point and prepare for his arrival. "Hold, runner," she called out, raising a staff decorated with eagle feathers and bear claws. "Show the tokens that grant passage to the western lands." Without leaving the water, the runner displayed both the bark strip and the speaking cord, holding them high enough for the keeper to examine their markings. The woman studied them carefully, comparing what she saw with the memory pattern she had learned during her training. The spiral carving matched the expected design. The notch count was correct. The knot pattern in the speaking cord corresponded to the formal message structure used by the Eastern Councils. "The tokens are true," she declared, stepping aside to allow passage. "But the message you carry, speak the opening words, that I may judge their weight." "The Southern traders bring word," the runner began, using the exact phrasing he had memorized, "of great changes beyond the salt water." The woman's expression grew grave. Messages beginning with those formal words indicated information that could affect the safety and welfare of entire nations. Such words were never used lightly, never invoked for minor news or routine communications. The authentication was complete, but more importantly, she now understood the urgency that drove the runner forward. "Pass with blessing," she said, marking the air with her staff in the gesture of protection. "The mountain keeper has been warned of your approach, and the trail markers have been renewed as far as the high meadow. May your feet find swift purchase and your memory hold true to the words entrusted to you." The runner completed his crossing and paused briefly on the western bank to adjust his gear and consume a small portion of dried meat from his travel pouch. The authentication challenges would continue at each major relay point, but having passed the riverkeeper's test, he was now officially recognized as carrying legitimate communications across territorial boundaries. The mark of her staff blessing would be noted by any other keepers he encountered, confirming his right to use the protected trails and sacred relay stations. As he resumed his westward journey, the runner reflected on the weight of the message he carried. Changes beyond the salt water, thunder weapons, and four-legged beasts. The words carried implications that reached far beyond simple curiosity about distant peoples. If the Southern traders' information proved accurate, the world itself might be entering a time of transformation unlike anything their ancestors had ever experienced. The trail beyond the river crossing led upward through increasingly rugged terrain, following ancient paths that wound between granite outcroppings and stands of pine that grew denser as elevation increased. These were the approaches to the mountain relay system, where messages could be passed across distances that would take days to travel on foot, using a combination of smoke signals, polished mirror flashes, and carefully positioned drum stations. The runner's destination was the high meadow where Stormwatcher maintained the most sophisticated relay station in the entire network. From that elevated position, messages could be transmitted across multiple ridgelines simultaneously, reaching half a dozen different territorial councils within hours of their arrival. But reaching the mountain station required more than simple endurance. It demanded precise timing and coordination with the keeper's schedule. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen, the runner reached a predetermined signal point marked by a cairn of white stones. Here, according to the network's protocols, he was required to announce his approach and receive confirmation that the mountain keeper was ready to receive his message. The runner gathered dry wood and prepared a small signal fire, then created the smoke pattern that would identify him as an authorized message bearer approaching from the Eastern Territories. 4 quick puffs, followed by a long sustained column, then 2 more quick releases. The pattern repeated 3 times before he allowed the fire to die down and waited for the mountain keeper's response. The wait stretched longer than usual, causing the runner to wonder if Stormwatcher had encountered some difficulty or delay. Messages of such importance could not afford to be held up by scheduling problems or communication failures. Then came the answer, not the expected smoke signal, but the deep, resonant boom of the great drum that Stormwatcher maintained at the high station. 3 measured beats, each one rolling across the mountainside like distant thunder, followed by a rapid series of smaller strikes that conveyed the message. Approach confirmed. Extreme urgency recognized. Prepare for immediate relay upon arrival. The runner felt relief wash through him as the drum signals faded into the mountain air. The network was functioning perfectly, each keeper responding with the precision and dedication that kept information flowing across the vast distances of the continent. But the drum's message also carried a note of unusual urgency that suggested Stormwatcher had already received preliminary information about the content of the approaching communication. The final ascent to the mountain station tested every aspect of the runner's training and endurance. The trail grew steep and treacherous, winding through areas where a single misstep could send a traveler tumbling down rock slides that would delay any message for days or weeks. But these dangers also served as natural security measures, ensuring that only the most skilled and dedicated runners could reach the mountain relay points. No enemy force could threaten the network's security by seizing these remote and difficult positions. As the runner climbed through the gathering afternoon shadows, he could hear the preparatory sounds of increased activity from the station above. Additional drums being positioned, mirror signals being tested, signal fires being prepared for immediate lighting. Stormwatcher was clearly preparing for a major message transmission that would reach multiple destinations simultaneously. Whatever information the runner carried, its importance was being recognized and acted upon with the full resources of the mountain relay system. The implications of such preparations were sobering. In the runner's experience, only messages concerning warfare, natural disasters, or threats to the fundamental safety of the Alliance network warranted such extensive relay protocols. The Southern traders' news of changes beyond the saltwater was clearly being treated as information of the highest possible importance, worthy of the fastest and most comprehensive distribution the network could provide. Stormwatcher's station occupied a natural shelf of granite near the mountain's peak, where carefully constructed stone circles provided protected positions for signal fires while offering commanding views of the surrounding territory. The keeper himself was a man of perhaps 50 summers, with the keen eyes and steady hands essential for the precise mirror work and smoke signaling that his position required. He had been expecting the runner's arrival since receiving the preliminary warnings, and had prepared accordingly. "Welcome, bearer of the Eastern words," Stormwatcher said as the runner completed the final climb to the station. "The drums have been speaking your approach since the sun passed overhead, and the mirror signals have already carried preliminary warnings to 6 different councils. Show me the tokens, that we may proceed with proper authentication." The familiar ritual of token examination proceeded quickly, Stormwatcher's experienced eye confirming the legitimacy of both the bark carving and the speaking chord's knot patterns. But even before the authentication was complete, the runner could see that unusual preparations were underway. Additional relay runners waited at the station, young men and women from different territories, each ready to carry the message forward along their respective routes. This was clearly intended to be a major distribution operation, reaching far more destinations than a typical message relay. The words, "I carry," the runner began, settling into the formal recitation posture, come from the Grand Council of the Eastern Shore, approved by 11 voices speaking in agreement. The Southern traders bring word of great changes beyond the salt water. New peoples have been seen along the far shores, of great changes beyond the far salt water, things no one here had proper names for. Stormwatcher's expression grew increasingly grave as the recitation continued. The message contained not just general warnings about distant changes, but specific recommendations for preparation and coordination among the allied nations. The gathering at Great Falls was to be moved to an earlier season. Trade routes might need to be adjusted. Defensive preparations should be considered, though no immediate threat was indicated. As the runner completed his recitation, Stormwatcher began the process of encoding the message for multiple relay systems. Each destination would require slightly different encoding, depending on the communication methods available along different routes. Some territories relied primarily on drum networks. Others used elaborate mirror signal systems. Still others depended on coded smoke patterns that could be read across great distances. The mirror work began first, as the angle of the late afternoon sun provided optimal conditions for long-distance light signals. Stormwatcher positioned himself behind a polished copper reflector the size of a war shield, sending coded flashes toward relay stations positioned on distant peaks. Each flash pattern contained the essential elements of the message, compressed into the standardized light speech used by the mountain keepers. To the northwest, toward the territories where the great herds roamed, went a series of long and short flashes that would be decoded and retransmitted by relay, stations across many ridgelines and long reaches of country. To the southwest, toward the desert peoples, went a different pattern adapted to their own communication protocols. To the north, toward the cold water people, went yet another encoding that would travel through the lake and river relay systems. As darkness approached, Stormwatcher completed the light signaling and turned to the drum network. The great drum, carved from a single massive oak trunk and covered with specially prepared hide, could send messages that would be audible across vast distances when atmospheric conditions were favorable. The keeper began the evening transmission that would carry news of the Southern traders' report to every drum station within hearing range. As full darkness settled over the mountain peaks, Stormwatcher concluded the major relay transmissions and turned his attention to preparing return messages for the various territorial councils. The network operated on a system of acknowledgement and response that ensured every important message reached its intended destinations and prompted appropriate action from the receiving authorities. The runner who had carried the original message was now ready to begin his return journey, carrying with him a new set of authentication tokens and a speaking cord encoded with the mountain keeper's confirmation that the message had been successfully transmitted to all required destinations. His route back to the Eastern Territories would follow a different path, using alternate relay stations that would allow him to gather any response messages that might be generated by the various councils. But the night also brought a new responsibility for Stormwatcher and his station. The message about changes beyond the saltwater was clearly the beginning of a longer communication sequence that would require sustained coordination among multiple territorial networks. The keeper began preparing for extended operations, organizing supplies and establishing schedules with the regional runners who would maintain constant communication links until the situation became clearer. As the runner prepared to descend into the darkness for his return journey, Stormwatcher handed him a special token, a small stone carved with the symbol of the mountain eagle, indicating that he carried priority communications requiring immediate attention at every relay station along his route. Such tokens were used rarely, only when information of extraordinary importance needed to travel with maximum speed and security. "Tell the Eastern Keepers," Stormwatcher said, "that the mountain relay stands ready for continuous operation. Whatever develops from this news of distant changes, the network will carry every word with the speed of the eagle and the certainty of stone. The ancient agreements will be honored, and no council will face these new times without the support of all allied nations." The runner secured the priority token alongside his other authentication materials and began the descent along the moonlit trail. Behind him, Stormwatcher's signal fires continued to burn through the night, maintaining the communication links that would ensure the network's readiness for whatever challenges the dawn might bring. The great drums fell silent, but they remained positioned and ready for immediate use if additional urgent messages required transmission. As the runner disappeared into the forest shadows below, Stormwatcher reflected on the significance of the day's communications. Changes beyond the salt water, thunder weapons, and unknown beasts. The very phrases suggested a transformation in the world that might require all the wisdom and coordination the Alliance networks could provide. The message bearers had done their work with characteristic precision and dedication. Now it remained to be seen how the various councils would respond to this news from distant shores. The night wind carried no further signals from the surrounding relay stations, suggesting that the initial message distribution was complete and that the various territorial keepers were now focused on delivering communications to their respective councils. By dawn, the news of changes beyond the saltwater would have reached decision-makers across half the continent, carried by the intricate system of runners, signal fires, drums, and mirrors that connected nation to nation in times of both peace and crisis. In the growing chill of the mountain air, Stormwatcher settled in for the long vigil that his position required. The network slept, but it never rested. Somewhere in the darkness, other runners were carrying other messages along other routes, maintaining the flow of information that kept the Alliance strong and the territories secure. The ancient system continued its eternal work, carrying words across distances that would challenge even the swiftest runner or the strongest dugout canoe. The chord had spoken. The message had traveled. The network stood ready for whatever dawn might bring.